A Republican congressman has indicated that President Biden should be impeached, convicted, and potentially charged with treason over hilariously unsubstantiated claims of corruption, while at the same time a Republican presidential candidate is correctly pointing out the unprecedented corruption of Donald Trump's family. The contrast is stark. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. All right, folks, it's another day, which means it's yet another day for congressional Republicans to continue to waste time and political capital fruitlessly attacking President Biden politically and his family, instead of using their efforts to try to work bipartisanly on solutions for problems that the American people actually care about, like Ukraine, the southern border, the wage gap, inflation, climate change, things like that, gun violence. Things like that, things that actually matter to the vast majority of Americans. Congressional Republicans have had absolutely no interest in that, and instead have wasted their time, effort, and energy trying to attack President Biden and his family politically, because they know they cannot and will never be able to compete on record. You compare the Republican Party's record of governance to the Democratic Party's record of governance, at least for the past 40 years, and Democrats are vastly, objectively superior by virtually every metric. Republicans know that. They're not stupid. But they want to win elections. That's really all that matters to them. And so they know that their two advantages are political weaponization and their various systemic advantages, things like gerrymandering, the Electoral College, etc., and so forth. So you have the Freedom Caucus, which is the far right flank of the Republican Party, which is already relatively far right. And you have somebody like Andy Biggs. He is part of the Freedom Caucus. He's a Trump loyalist. He's shoulder to shoulder with Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the crazy people. And he did an interview with Fox propagandist Maria Bartiromo. Now, this pertains to the congressional investigations into, again, President Biden and the Biden crime family. And I should also remind you that Republicans have persistently, repeatedly stepped on rakes publicly when it comes to attacking President Biden. They've been called out. It's been so embarrassing. They've not only been called out by the left and Democrats, they've been called out by Fox News repeatedly, by Fox and Friends, by Maria Bartiromo, by, I think, Hannity and others have pointed out, like, guys, you've been making these bold claims about how you got Biden and Biden's guilty and Biden's corrupt, and you never, ever, ever produce the receipts. It's pathetic. And it is pathetic. Of course, they don't have the receipts because the receipts probably don't exist. But anyway, I want to play this clip between Andy Biggs and Maria Bartiromo, and we'll go from there.
If we're starting to talk quid pro quo and pay for play and access purchasing, you actually have probably the biggest scandal in American history, biggest political scandal in American history, because you would have a vice president who was on the take, and that becomes something that is absolutely reprehensible, obviously. But if it's
the biggest political scandal in history, if he says, if it's true, you know, if I had wings, I'd be, I don't know, a dragonfly. If, like, you know what I mean? If I had wheels, I would be a motor vehicle. Like, if is doing so much carrying in these hypotheticals. And by the way, even if it were true, probably still wouldn't be the biggest political scandal in history. Just ludicrous hyperbole, red meat for his base. I want to play another clip of Andy Biggs where he talks about specifics in terms of what should be done against President Biden. So again, let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
If this is all proven and you all come out and you have the evidence that Joe Biden and his family has been selling America out now for a decade, while he was vice president, where is this going? They impeached Trump. Are you going to move to impeach Joe Biden?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He would need to be impeached. And then once he was impeached, hopefully there'd be some Democrats in the Senate that would recognize how grave the situation is and encourage him to resign like Goldwater did to Nixon. But once he's out of there, then he would have to be indicted, because this is gross criminal misconduct. And some would even suggest treasonous, but I'm holding my tongue on that just yet. But we have got to find out how extensive this was, and then we have to take action. I mean, enough talk is talk. But if we produce this evidence that's starting to pile up, by the way, there's so much evidence, it's voluminous. It's taking everything.
So much evidence, it's voluminous, except they, on every other opportunity to publicly present evidence, they've had nothing. Again, not only have they had nothing, they've been called out by members of right-wing conservative media persistently. Like, guys, you've got nothing. If you've got it, you were just not sharing it. Somebody has misled you to think that what you're showing us is something important when it's not. That's how pathetic these attempts have been. They can't even get the enthusiastic support of their own conservative mouthpieces because they're like, okay, you guys are talking a big game, but man, you're showing us some, international transactions with members of the Biden family. Number one, that doesn't show corruption. Number two, the members of the Biden family involved are not Joe Biden, who is the sitting president. So, you are so far from making your case, and yet you're telling us the evidence is voluminous? Really? Anyway, so you got that world with Andy Biggs talking about the corruption of the Biden crime family and impeachment and conviction. And I'm not going to say treason. I mean, other people are saying treason. I'm just going to hold my tongue right now. But, wink, wink, treason. And then you have another Republican, Chris Christie, who has announced that he is running for president against President Trump. And he stands almost no chance, to be sure. And this is not, the first time that Christie and Trump have competed against one another. Christie ran for president in 2015, 2016, lost to Trump, led his transition team into the White House, and then was basically ignored by Trump for most of Trump's presidency. And over time, Christie, who endorsed Trump in 2016 and then again in 2020, has begun to be more vocal in his criticism. But you know how a broken clock is right twice a day? Chris Christie actually has something correct to say about corruption and political families. So let's take a look.
The grift from this family is breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Kushner walk out of the White House and months later get $2 billion from the Saudis. $2 billion from the Saudis. You think it's because he's some kind of investing genius? Or do you think it's because he was sitting next to the President of the United States for 4 years doing favors for the Saudis? That's your money. That's your money he stole. And gave it to his family. You know what that makes us? A banana republic. That's what it makes us.
So kudos to former New Jersey governor and Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie for pointing this out. He's absolutely correct. So the Republicans are so far from making their case against President Biden. Meanwhile, we have truly voluminous evidence against the Trump family and Donald Trump himself in terms of grift, graft, and corruption. And again, we talked about the Saudi Arabia situation, but right now, according to Republicans, they believe that President Biden received $5 million as vice president to make some sort of unholy deal with some sort of foreign adversary or foreign country. I think China is the one that they have suggested it is. They've offered absolutely no evidence of the transaction or the quid pro quo. They haven't named whatever policy was changed. Vice presidents don't have any official authority anyway, right, in terms of the Constitution. So again, it's just all scattershot and speculation. Meanwhile, we do have direct evidence that the Saudi Arabian government and the UAE government, the United Arab Emirates, paid Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who worked in the White House, who was an official government advisor to President Trump. He was on the government payroll. He was not just his son, not just his son-in-law, not just married to Trump's daughter. He was an official member of the Trump White House, who in that capacity was Trump's representative in many respects to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So there was an official government relationship between Trump and Jared, and Trump, Jared, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And the day after he leaves the White House, Jared Kushner gets a $2 billion deal with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Not $2 million, not $200 million, not $5 million, $2 billion. So literal orders of magnitude worse than what the Republicans say but can't prove about then Vice President Biden. The double standard is thick, and kudos to Chris Christie for pointing that out, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's beyond question that President Biden engaged in, or it's out of the question that President Biden once engaged in corruption, or that members of President Biden's family have acted with nepotism or corruption. All that is entirely possible. But the evidence for it is relatively slim. Meanwhile, we have factual evidence in droves, that Donald Trump and the Trump family, using government power and government connections, engage in extraordinary acts of corruption. It's not equal. The Trump family is objectively far more corrupt than the Biden family, which means if you were behaving rationally, your focus would be on the Trump family and addressing that and crushing that. The fact that Republicans have absolutely no interest and have had absolutely no interest in it is just proof that they're playing politics. So they shouldn't be given the benefit of the doubt. Your expectations should be hilariously low. And Republicans, as they always do, will fail you.